Welcome to the Arkham Sessions. I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Brian Ward.
Hey there.
How are you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
I'm doing well. I actually wanted to start the episode off today by reading a really nice email that we got since the last episode.
Really nice email. We should definitely read that.
Oh, we don't want to read any of the mean emails.
I'm all about nice emails.
So this one comes from Greg, and he says, "Hi, I've been listening to your podcasts, and I've really gotten a lot out of them. I'm a father of an 18-year-old boy with ADHD, depression, anxiety, and other issues. It has been hard to understand the clinical issues, but I've actually been able to put much of this in context by listening to you. He recently started DBT therapy, so your description of this in one of the early shows was timely, other than saying the Joker needs it. Thanks for doing this project, and I hope it continues."
Wow.
DBT, of course, is dialectical behavioral therapy, and we talked about it in one of our earlier Joker episodes. Greg goes on to say in a follow-up email, "Are you going to San Diego Comic-Con this year? I take my son annually, and it has been a good bonding experience. For whatever it's worth, you do a much better job explaining the diagnosis of the issues you discuss than most, if not all, the doctors, therapists, etc. we have used."
Wow. That's really complimentary.
That's really nice.
Yeah. And I don't know about San Diego. I mean, we'll definitely be there.
We will.
In what capacity? I'm not entirely sure. My company's there every year. We've got a booth, Shout Factory, where we sell DVDs and Blu-rays. We usually have panels with big announcements of upcoming projects and things like that. But I don't know. I would like to see the Arkham Sessions have a panel this year, but we'll have to see. We will definitely have a panel, however, at WonderCon later this month, and just in a couple of weeks.
That's right. So April 18th through 20th is WonderCon, which is sort of the cousin, the younger cousin of Comic-Con, out in Anaheim, California. And we have a panel together.
Yeah, it's not Arkham Sessions related, but it's just as cool.
It is. It's the psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars.
Yep.
So this is a recurring panel that we've done in previous conventions, specifically WonderCon and Comic-Con.
Yep.
And we will be talking about the psychology of both Star Trek and Star Wars in a kind of a fun, entertaining debate.
Yeah, it's sort of which one handles the psychological themes better, depending on what it is we're talking about. The first iteration of this was last year at WonderCon, and Star Trek eked out a victory. Blood was in the water, and Star Wars snatched it up.
It was Klingon blue blood.
That's purple.
Oh,
but
see, this is why I'm on the Star Wars side.
Right. Well, that's the thing too. Is you are the psychologist for the Star Wars side. You have a colleague, Dr. Ali Matu, who is the psychologist for the Star Trek side. So the two of you get to defend your respective sides, and then we always have special guests. Andrea, who are our very special guests joining us this time?
So this time we have Chase Masterson. Of course, we know her from Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
And Catherine Tabor, who's the voice of Padme in Star Wars The Clone Wars. Very
excited about seeing both of those ladies at the panel, because they're both very well-spoken people, very smart.
Yep.
They know their stuff, and I think it's going to be an amazing panel.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. That one is going to be Saturday night at 7:30.
Oh, but you might not have been ready to talk about this, but you've actually got a couple of other panels that weekend, right?
That's true. So Saturday morning, I'm on a panel called The Battle for Multicultural Heroes. And that will be a panel discussing, basically celebrating and discussing diversity in superhero comics, and
of which there's plenty.
Right.
Lots to talk about.
Well, clearly a lot of times, this is actually another recurring panel. It was done at Comic-Con. And I'm very honored to be invited to this version of it at WonderCon. And yeah, we actually do talk about underrepresentation of both ethnic, racial, and gender minorities in comic books. And so that's hopefully going to be an educational, but also hopefully, an insightful and thought-provoking panel.
Very cool. And then you've got a third one.
I do. So Sunday afternoon, I will be speaking with Gail Simone, who is, of course, the writer of Batgirl.
Yeah.
And that panel is called Batgirl Begins Again. So that panel really goes into Batgirl's story and celebrates Batgirl's very real-life trauma and psychology that we see in the comic book. And I'm just honored to be a part of it with Gail.
And if you guys aren't familiar, Gail is an amazing panelist in her own right. She does a lot of panels at a lot of different conventions. Very excited about seeing that one. In addition to Batgirl, she's also currently writing a number of books. Tomb Raider,
Red Sonja.
She is really in it, and I'm very excited about seeing that. Very cool. That's our WonderCon schedule. So.
It is, and if folks want to get the times and locations for those panels, the schedule is on my site under themaskonline.com.
Previously on Batman.
That's right. Previously on Batman. Batman was after a cat burglar, discovered that the cat burglar was in fact Catwoman.
So, our new cat burglar's a woman.
She was stealing jewels basically in order to finance this land deal that she wanted to do, where she was going to purchase a bunch of land to use as a habitat for mountain lions. She found out through connections with Bruce that land was being sold to another company for what they said was going to be a resort. Turns out, through a little investigation of her own, that was basically a front, that underground they were going to have this military installation. And in the last few moments of the episode, Catwoman escapes, leaves Batman hanging, and says basically, look, you've saved me a couple of times, but I'm going to go about my business, and until next time. And he says,
and there will be a next time.
Yeah, well, from the psychology end, we learned that Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, are very similar. Like, we're talking about their identities. They're very similar. She's very fluid in her transition from Catwoman to Selina. Meanwhile, Batman
couldn't be any more different.
Right. He's as Bruce Wayne, and we get to know him a little bit in the last episode, with Bruce Wayne being romantically interested in Selina Kyle, which we haven't really seen him.
Yeah, first time
do
we've
that
really
before.
seen anyone interested in a woman, or anyone.
Exactly. He's not really showing desires to connect with people, but we do see him, express that and blush quite a bit. But then as Batman, when he has the cowl on and he's doing his job as Batman, he's not really receptive to Catwoman's advances. He's really not distracted by her flirting and kissing and all that. And he just really is sort of very, as we said, very rigid in his identity as Batman.
He's clearly intrigued by her. You can sense this chemistry between them, even when they're both in cowls. But he is not going to let that curiosity get the better of his mission. He is going to bring her in one way or another.
Yes.
Of course, he doesn't know that she's Selina. She doesn't know that Bruce is Batman.
Correct.
And the two of them are now, for lack of a better pun, playing cat and
bat.
Bat. Yeah. Turns out that a global terrorist by the name of Red Claw is in Gotham City, or at least is rumored to be in Gotham City. We, of course, know that Red Claw is in Gotham because we have seen her. That's right, her. Which takes a number of people by surprise. Everyone is assuming Red Claw is a man. But we have seen Red Claw, played by Kate Mulgrew. And now we know from the previous episode, there's a train heist planned, and that train carries a plague. Batman comes to the conclusion that it's got to be some sort of secret government train. We then cut to a military train where, in fact, there are a couple of guards guarding what looks like a canister or a box.
It's the plague.
It's a box with the plague in it.
You know, when I saw those army commercials on TV, they never said anything about guarding no plague.
True to her word, Red Claw and her men attack. They board the train. Batman shows up. There is a fight, and Red Claw manages actually to get the canister. She takes off, but not before Batman can tell that Red Claw is a woman.
Red Claw? A woman?
Why is he so surprised that some of these other people some of these very competent, intelligent people are actually women?
After all, we have seen him take on a female villain in the past. He did deal with Poison Ivy. It is possible that some of his arch villains could be women. This one is different, though. She is strong. She is, while Poison Ivy used her wiles and her seductive charms, Red Claw isn't having any of that.
No. And Catwoman also is rather flirty and uses seduction as well.
Absolutely.
But no, Red Claw is
she is militant. She's a brick wall. I mean, she is you get the hint of what's probably a Russian accent. In fact, what's interesting is that Red Claw is played by Kate Mulgrew, who plays Red on Orange is the New Black, a Russian chef who's using very much the same voice for Red Claw, although maybe the accent is a little toned down, probably for animation audiences. But you can get the sense that Kate Mulgrew's done this sort of accent before.
Yeah.
Which is why she's so good on that show.
And Red Claw has a reputation. She informs Catwoman, you'll soon understand, why people fear me.
Yeah.
And we get we get the impression that she is very powerful, potentially very violent, and capable of very, very terrible things.
She does manage to escape. This has sort of become a theme with Batman. Catwoman escaped from Batman twice last episode. Now Red Claw escapes from Batman. He sort of lets the women slip through his fingers.
I don't know. Red Claw has the plague in her hands and actually says,
"This plague kills indiscriminately,
You'll die too.
along with everyone else within a 10-mile radius. Can you risk it, Batman? Go on, call my bluff. You finally met your match, Batman. Not surprising, it's a woman."
he doesn't really call her bluff.
Yeah, we find out that her plan, she wants, within 24 hours, $1 million in gold bullion. She wants it in 24 hours or she's going to launch the plague. Bruce gets an opportunity to take Selina on that lunch date that got interrupted in the first episode. Only it gets interrupted again because Bruce is clearly a little preoccupied. He's just learned of this 24-hour mandate. And now he's got Selina, who's happy, in the front seat of his car. The two of them start to drive to the restaurant when they are, in fact, attacked from another car. He recognizes the drivers because they're the people he just beat up on that train. Mm-hmm.
Well, and they're ramming his car with the front end of their car. So, he and Selina are basically almost driven off the road.
Right. Bruce, at this point, if I were Bruce, I would suspect that they know who I am. Because you've got Selina Kyle in the seat next to you. Presumably, she has nothing to do with this. He just beat these people up on a train, and now they're attacking his car. I don't know. My first instinct is, somebody knows who I am. Mm-hmm. Turns out they're after Selina because she knows about the military installation. She has successfully escaped. They know who she is,
right? And
they're after her. Bruce, through evasive maneuvers and some pretty good driving. Actually, this is the part that seems a little weird to me. Their car goes off the bridge into the water below. Bruce of course, Batman doesn't kill, would probably benefit a great deal by getting these guys, continues to drive, and even cracks a joke. And those guys, of course, are alive at the bottom.
Right. They swim out of the car and we see them head towards the bridge.
Right.
So we know that they survived that crash.
Yeah. But Bruce is not at all concerned about their well-being, and even cracks wise as he drives away, which seems a little unlike Batman.
Where'd you learn to drive like that?
Oh, I've been going to the Paris Grand Prix for years. You know, one of these days I think I'll enter it.
Well, I see what you're saying, but he is on a hot date.
It is true. He is on a hot take.
And he has, at least once, he has basically been prevented from spending some quality time with Selena. So I think that he wants to...
He's not going to let this keep them down.
No.
Except it does, because then they spend the rest of the day in the police department.
He spends time with her.
Right. Giving a statement, filling out paperwork. They leave, takes her home. Bruce offers to help Selena.
I really care about you. I haven't felt this way in a long, long time.
We can see him open up a bit and show his vulnerability and it really demonstrating and expressing that he's willing to be a part of her life, really. And she rebuffs him. She basically says that she'll take care of herself.
Thanks, Bruce, but I've never been able to play the damsel in distress.
He goes back to the Batcave knowing that somehow or another Selena's involved with this. Rather than jump to the conclusion that the people he just beat up knows who he is, he knows for a fact that they must know who Selena is and that somehow she is involved. Alfred finds an interesting hair on Bruce's jacket, and it turns out to be a cat hair, but one with a color that Alfred has never seen on a cat, which seems odd because we've seen Isis, the cat, and it was black. Mm-hmm. Kind of a standard cat hair color. Mm-hmm. This intrigues Bruce.
I think he puts it together quite quickly.
Absolutely.
Her cover's blown.
Alfred says he's never seen a cat hair of this color. Batman responds.
Batman has.
Batman refers to himself in the third person in this.
Well, like we said, he does take the two personas as
three
if they're
personas.
The three personas as if they're separate. So when he needs to be Bruce Wayne for social and political reasons, he's Bruce Wayne. When he needs to be Batman for justice, he's Batman.
He really is very, not just rigid in his sense of justice and the pursuit of justice, but he is rigid in declaring these three personas as three very different personas.
Well, and he's also telling Alfred and telling us, the audience, what that means.
Don't go breaking the fourth wall.
Well, I think we have to, because what he's saying is, now I know.
We then go to Maven. She is, as we remember, the assistant to Selena Kyle, and she's attacked in her apartment, or in Selena's apartment, and she is sitting there trying to relax, but one of those criminals that if only Bruce had gotten out of the car to go get, this may not have happened. But he is there in the apartment. She sees him in a reflection in a glass table, and actually isn't the damsel in distress. There isn't a damsel in distress in this episode. She's three strong women. She fights back.
Yeah, it's quite cool. She sees his reflection and on the glass table, and she takes, I think it's she's drinking a beverage out of a glass, and she takes that and basically throws it in the direction of his face and runs away, goes for the door, tries to escape. Now, unfortunately, he does get her. He grabs her.
Right.
And luckily, Batman happens to arrive at that moment. And her glasses somehow end up on the floor, so we see this blurry vision through her eyes of Batman fighting with this the henchman and taking him out. And,
what I love about that shot, though, is that it's blurry POV. You then see the glasses come over the eyes. Everything becomes clear. And then you watch her enter the frame. So in the middle of that shot, we have gone from her POV to a completely separate angle. And she has walked into the frame. It's a really interesting...
That's cool.
It's a really interesting shot. I like it a lot.
I kind of want to know what her alter ego is. I feel like she's kind of a bright, spunky young woman, and I'm sort of interested to know what her story is.
Right. I'm very interested in learning more about Maven. Catwoman isn't there. Selina's not there. She is en route to this underground facility, and she actually goes into the underground facility. It's already there. Turns out this was a government-built facility in order to get high-ranking officials underground into a safe environment in case there was ever some sort of nuclear attack. And it is since abandoned. Red Claw has taken it over. And Batman shows up there, and the two of them are both taken captive by Red Claw, who informs them of her plan, her devilish plan.
Since you wanted the plague so badly, Batman, we've decided to give it to you.
What will you use to blackmail Gotham if you waste it on us?
Why risk carrying such deadly contents when a placebo will do?
She's not going to use the plague. She is on them. She captures them. She ties them to a chair. But she isn't going to use the plague on Gotham. She actually says that a placebo will do the job nicely.
Yeah, she has them tied up back to back in a chair and opens up the canister, and we see this sort of gas come out. And it was just a weird, I don't know, it is a weird plan because she just intends on killing those two and threatening the rest of Gotham City that she'll...
It's kind of brilliant because she had to steal the plague in order to threaten Gotham, but turns out she doesn't really have any intention of killing anybody.
Right.
She just wants them to know that she has it.
Right.
And that she could kill them. So it just makes her threat that much, which really is, I guess, what a terrorist does. They just incite fear. If you're going to threaten them, you've got to have the guns to back it up, or in this case, the plague.
The plague.
Which is sort of an acid plague.
It's a vague plague.
It is.
We don't really know what... They never explain what it is.
They never explain what it is, but they certainly show us what it does. It's a red gas that comes up, and then the acid actually starts to corrode everything in its path, and presumably it will eventually start to eat Batman and Catwoman.
Well, luckily Catwoman has claws, and
Yeah.
apparently they didn't think about this when they tied them up with rope. So she gets them out. By that point, Red Claw and her team are out of the facility and basically evacuating. And there's an interesting moment where Catwoman and Batman are heading out, and Batman decides that he needs to stay back in order to ensure that no one gets hurt by this plague.
Right.
Not without you.
I'll be right behind you. But first, I've got to destroy the plague. Now go!
And he kind of holds her and tells her, please, you need to leave now. And it's the reason I said it was interesting is that in my mind, this is the first time as Batman that he's close and connected and compassionate with Catwoman. Of course, he wants to save her life. He wants to ensure her safety. So he wants her to leave the building. But he doesn't direct her. He's not ordering her. He's sort of pleading with her.
Please.
As if to say, I care about you and I want you to be okay.
Yeah, because she's Selina, and he knows she's Selina.
And he knows she's Selina at this point.
So he is now a different guy around her, even when under the cowl.
We didn't mention this when he was at Maven's apartment. Maven tells him, since you know who she is, you should also know.
She's in love with you.
So Batman now knows that Selina, also Catwoman, is in love with Batman.
Yeah.
Because Selina doesn't know that Bruce is Batman.
Right.
So,
Talk about that a little bit. The rejection that Bruce must feel, knowing that Selina really isn't necessarily into Bruce, but she is madly in love with Batman.
right.
This is sort of a DC theme. Lois Lane is madly in love with Superman, but not Clark.
Yeah.
Clark must feel the exact same thing that Bruce is feeling the moment he finds out that she is not only Selina Kyle, but that Selina Kyle, the girl that he's tried to go on two dates with, is totally in love with his alter ego.
And he's put himself out there. Remember when he left her at her door, he said,
If you're in some kind of trouble, I wish you'd tell me. Perhaps I can help.
and she rejects him. She
Yeah.
rejects Bruce. So, we don't see this in the episode, but I do think that that does have an impact on his, I think, on his struggle with his identities to begin with. That he understands that as Batman, somehow he's more compelling and attractive and the person that somebody could love.
Right.
As Bruce Wayne, or as Bruce, now certainly he experiences women out in, Gothamites are attracted to him and perhaps they're interested in his public.
Well, we've seen that
persona is high
they
profile.
swoon. I mean, when they
Yeah.
were bidding on her or on him, they were throwing themselves at him, and he didn't really seem to be bothered
Right.
by any of that.
So we've talked about before how when women are attracted to Bruce Wayne, this public persona, he's not really interested in them because Bruce Wayne isn't a real person. That's not who he is. So yeah, when Selina essentially rejects Bruce and is in love with Batman, I think that has an impact on how he feels about who he is.
He now sort of sees that their relationship almost has to be exclusively Batman Catwoman and not Bruce Selina.
And Bruce might feel there might be this acceptance, like, well, Bruce is unlovable, right? There could be some long-standing issues of losing people. I lost my parents. We don't see this in the animated series, but we know he's lost his sidekicks. We know he's lost other people close to him. And he hasn't really had strong connections other than Alfred. So that could definitely add to his feelings of, I can't get close to people. I'm unlovable. I'm unwanted. And when I do get close to people, I lose them. So what that's telling him is, okay, as Batman, I'm lovable. People want to connect with me. As Bruce Wayne, people want a piece of me. But as Bruce, who is really going to care about me? And, he can't really answer that.
Right. So he blows the place up. He blows the installation up, really setting Red Claw off. She finds Catwoman and begins to basically pummel her.
She starts beating her up.
Until a mountain lion attacks her. These were the mountain lions that Selina wanted to protect on this piece of land. It tackles Red Claw to the ground and basically lets it be known that the mountain lion is protecting Catwoman. And
It's a great scene because out of nowhere, this mountain lion attacks Red Claw and then pins her down and doesn't let her move. And then Catwoman looks up and Batman is seen
just standing there
watching them from,
And we don't know how long he'd been watching.
I think the whole time.
He could have been watching Red Claw go to town.
He was watching a girl fight is what was happening. But, we see her, she looks up and he's there and they connect. And as you said, the facility is just, the entire place goes up in flames.
Yeah.
It's just gone.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Gordon, basically says, well, we've wrapped this up.
Almost.
Catwoman exits, but gives one of her patented, blows her kiss to Batman as she leaves.
Right. He's got to be sick of that by now.
Yeah. It's always going to be a blown kiss, except when she actually kissed him on the rooftop at the end of the first episode.
Well, no, what I mean is that he must be resentful that she's being so flirty with Batman, and he's sort of still dealing with the idea that as Selina, she won't be into Bruce. So the next thing we see is Catwoman in her dark apartment, and of course, who shows up? Batman. And they have this interesting exchange because, I don't know, I got the sense, I remember when I first saw this, that he's going to profess his love to her, or they're going to have this moment, but instead he handcuffs her and he's going to take her in.
With like bat cuffs. Of all the things, I mean, I get that you're Batman. I get that you've got gadgets and that you've got weapons and things like that, but do the cuffs really need to resemble the bat?
Yes.
In some way?
Yes, they do.
Of all the things you could be spending your money on, this is what you're going to do.
He has an unlimited amount of money. So why not just make the handcuffs look like bats?
Now, what's great about the exchange they have in this apartment is that Bruce, or Batman, doesn't want Catwoman to be treated like a common criminal. He even says, when she asks him, "Have you told the police who I am?"
Not yet.
Why not?
I didn't want you taken away like a common criminal.
And then she says, "Oh, so you do care." And what's amazing is his response.
More than you will ever know.
So Bruce is totally hung up on this girl. But that rigidity is still there. In that he's got these feelings for her, but she still has to be taken in.
I think he wants what's best for her. He knows it's better for her in the long run to potentially get maybe a short sentence and, maybe get some kind of rehabilitation. He certainly wants her to be treated better than the other, Gotham villains that he's used to dealing with. But it makes me wonder, when you look back to his insistence at the facility for her to leave, and he appeals to her emotion and really gets close and holds her and says, please, as if to say, please do this for me. I care about you. I need you to leave now. Now I'm wondering, maybe he's appealing to her emotions that way because he knows that Catwoman is in love with Batman and will do as he says. So it's almost as if to say, you're right. He never, he never broke away from the Batman rigid persona regarding justice.
Right.
And in fact, he just appealed to her emotions and her love for him by getting close to her physically and telling her to leave and pleading with her. And that was, as I said, that was more like his strategy to get her to leave so that he could take care of the plague and save his own life, right?
Right.
I don't know. That end scene sort of, for me, solidified that he wasn't falling for her, or he wasn't more amenable to the idea that Catwoman is in love with him as Batman. He was sort of just, like I said, just using that as a strategy. And it worked.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think he does certainly still feel things for her.
Yeah, he feels nothing.
No.
I'm just kidding.
It's funny that I'm the one arguing this point. I think
for once I'm sort of like, Batman is like so bad.
I don't know. I think the reason that he doesn't want her to be treated like a criminal is because he sees her as Selina Kyle. He sees her as this woman who wants to buy land for these animals, who goes and does these things that are criminal activities, sure, but she seems to have a good reason to do them.
Well, remember, Catwoman, unlike Poison Ivy, who's big into, conservationism and has a similar interest in preserving a different kind of wildlife. I feel like Catwoman she wasn't hurting anyone. Sure, she was stealing, but she wasn't interested in harming anybody. And I think I think I can agree with you that Batman probably saw some good in her.
This brings me to the listener question of the week. Bernard O'Shea tweeted us and asked, do you think Batman's relationship with Catwoman may fulfill some elements of Stockholm Syndrome? Why else would someone so adamant in their belief of justice overlook it for one person? And I think, I'm not the psychologist here, but I think, for starters, I don't think it's Stockholm Syndrome. For those who don't necessarily know what Stockholm Syndrome is, it's basically when a hostage starts to either sympathize or empathize with one of his or her captors or multiple captors. This has actually been done multiple times. And
it's been demonstrated or found in a number of different really important cases, right?
Yeah, I mean, the reason it's called Stockholm Syndrome is because there was a bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. And this bank robbery, actually, the robbers took hostages in the bank, and it lasted for, I believe, 6 days. And over the course of that 6 days, the hostages and the bank robbers developed some sort of bond in that when everything was over, the hostages actually defended the bank robbers.
Mm-hmm. Like they didn't want them to get into trouble.
Yeah, like they were very keen on. They were sort of at this point on the bank robbers' side, and it developed the name Stockholm Syndrome.
That that idea of Stockholm Syndrome comes from this need to be safe and protected. So we have a number of different basic needs as humans, and one of our needs is to be safe. And to be safe from harm. And I feel like when we think about those cases where Stockholm Syndrome occurred, it happened because over a period of time, the person or people being held captive knew and understood that their ability, their need to be safe was hugely dependent on a person with a weapon or holding them hostage, so to speak. So you develop a relationship with that person because of that need and because of that. Certainly there's fear involved, but also that dependency.
Well, I don't think it's Stockholm Syndrome because I don't think Batman has, for starters, he's not been held captive by Catwoman. He is not allowing this bond that he has with her through these negative events to affect his judgment. I think what is actually affecting his judgment is his feelings for Selina. Mm-hmm. He knows Catwoman for who Catwoman is. And he knows that he's got a huge crush on this girl. I mean, I can't imagine, I'm telling you right now, there have been instances where I have had crushes on someone and I have been willing to overlook things in those early stages of a relationship or whatever, where you just sort of let that go. And he doesn't overlook it. He still handcuffs her at the end and takes her into the police, but he does it in a way that is personal. He does it in a way where it's like, I am going to be the one that does it. I'm not going to let them treat you like a cat burglar.
Yeah.
And I still see at the end of this episode a greater link emotionally to a human being between Batman and Catwoman than I have ever seen Batman or Bruce or anyone else give to anybody else, including Alfred.
Well, I'm shocked to hear you explain and describe a well-adjusted Batman. You're coming around.
No, there's a first time for everything. There's a last time for everything. And I do think that Catwoman is probably the exception to the rule, at least until we get a little further down the road and we meet someone else.
Ooh.
You're not allowed to. We're not allowed to talk about that.
I know. He's not, and you're right. We finally see him physically hold somebody, plead with them, ask them to spend more time with him, ask them to let him in their life the way that he did with Selena. We don't really see him do that with anybody. So you're right. He cares about Alfred. He cares about Dick Grayson. He just doesn't, he's not exercising that affection, that connectedness. He's a bit standoffish and distancing. And, he's certainly more invested in his work as Batman than to invest in those relationships. So this is the exception. This is the time that we actually see him do that. And the sadness of this episode isn't more clear to me in the sense that, he has to arrest Catwoman and turn her in. And he says goodbye to that potential relationship.
Right.
He doesn't get to have that. He's Batman. He doesn't get to have that kind of closeness as much as he wanted that.
And he realizes that he wouldn't have it anyway. He wouldn't have it as Bruce. He would only have it as Batman, and he just can't have that relationship with someone that he's constantly pursuing for criminal activity. I think it's probably time to admit that occasionally in the course of these episodes, we will have to come out of an episode and say, everyone was working on a pretty nominal level.
Well, I mean, that's a great point. We can have an episode where we don't necessarily discuss a particular mental illness or disorder. We can have an episode where, we're not struggling to kind of understand bizarre behavior. I think that most of what we saw in this episode was straightforward. And sure, there is still psychology there because now we get more in-depth dimensions and different characteristics that we're putting together like pieces of a puzzle. So it's more information than we can that we can start to understand Batman better. So it's not a loss.
No. And, while it's not exactly helpful for a podcast about the psychology of Batman the Animated Series, I still think The Cat in the Claw is a good two-parter. It's a good story. It's sort of fun to watch Batman having these emotional ties to Catwoman. And
I think that's the way to look at it, too, that when you look at the episodes prior to this episode, he is vastly different in his, like we said, his reaching out to somebody, his asking to be in someone's life, his connectedness, and his desire to be, to have what other people have, relationships. So I think it's I think it stands, the last 20 some years. And I think certainly it's valuable as far as what we've been talking about.
I'll be interested to see, not that I expect anything to change, because again, we're working from a writer's Bible, and at the same time, we are dealing with many different writers. But I'll be interested to see if Bruce changes a little bit after this episode, if he becomes a little more accessible to people, or if we're going to stick to that rigidity.
Yeah, we'll see. So what is next?
Next, we have See No Evil. This is another one of those classic stories where your villain is invisible, and you've got to deal with that. So it certainly has a good opportunity to talk about maybe even a little further into what it's like to be unseen or unnoticed or hiding behind a mask of some kind.
Mm-hmm. That anonymity piece.
Yeah, that what can you do? So that one should be pretty interesting. That's next week. Until then, you can follow us on Twitter. We are at Arkham Sessions. I am at bward028. Drea, where can they find you?
I am at Arkham Asylum Doc.
You can also email us. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. You can also email Drea at her website, underthemaskonline.com. And you can sort of find us there. You can like us on Facebook. Definitely interact with us.
Yeah, so thanks to Greg for that really nice email.
Definitely.
Again, we do read all the emails, and we're certainly interested in what people have to say.
And thank you to Bernard O'Shea for his question this week. Until next week, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Litamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.